So we are joined to start off our second 9 weeks by Bola Sokunbi, all the way from New York City, the founder of Clever Girl Finance, published author, podcaster, influencer. We thank you so much for taking some time for us today. This is our personal finance class here at Velma Jackson High School. I've got a room full here with me, and we're recording this for all of our friends in Madison County schools. My good friend, Coach Robin Mercer, over at Madison Central High School, Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, the Academic Options Center, and our YouTube channel. So thank you again for taking some time for us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to everyone. Hi.
Now, obviously, we want to talk about all the great things you're doing with Clever Girl Finance and some great financial tips for our young people. But just give us a little background because you are originally from Nigeria, and you came to the United States to go to college at Webster University in St. Louis. So just take us through that whole process and journey.
Yes, so as you know, I'm the founder of Clever Finance, and like you mentioned, I'm originally from Nigeria. I'm the last of four. I was actually born in Austria in a city called Vienna,
Oh, cool.
because my dad worked there as a diplomat. But what's interesting
Wow.
is that what's part of my inspiration is that my mom and dad have a very wide age gap. So my mom got married at 19. My dad was in his early 30s. My dad was pursuing multiple master's degree, a PhD, and my mom only had her high school diploma. And so she was fine with that. She was a stay-at-home mom taking care of the kids. But then fast forward several years, she started wanting to be in a space where she could contribute to our household finances. And then she was seeing things happening around her with friends that she wasn't too comfortable with, where she wanted to have her own money. So my parents were married for 55 years. My dad is late now, but it got to a point where my dad had to retire early because of health issues, about 15 years earlier than he had planned. And so my mom stepped in as the breadwinner. And, before she stepped in as the breadwinner, because of what she had been seeing with her friends, she decided to go back to school to get her undergrad degree, get her master's degree, and then she just started hustling. My mom, when we moved back to Nigeria, she was working in investment banking as a banker. On the side, she had a Coca-Cola franchise, so she was a Coca-Cola distributor. She had a
Wow.
hair salon. She had a small girls' school, like a girls' training school, and she was just hustling to bring in money. And so when it came time for her to step in to support our family, she was able to do that. So that's a big part of my inspiration and why I'm so passionate about women and just everyone in general doing well with their money because money opens doors for you, money gives you options, and it can really have big impact in your community as well.
Yeah, and that's such a cool story about how your mom just took the bull by the horns. But it also was part of the inspiration that you went so hard and took your education so seriously when you went to college because I think most people forget international students are not eligible for the same thing as American students. Because we had an athlete from Canada who said I couldn't get NIL money as a soccer player. So you were not
Right.
able to get the same scholarships that an American student could get, and your parents sacrificed a lot for you to come to the U.S. and go to college.
Yes, that is absolutely true. So I didn't qualify for any student loans. I did have a partial scholarship in college where I worked in the library and they gave me like 2 credits for the semester, something like that. But it was really, it took me, I was pursuing a 4-year major and minor combined. And I did that in about 5.5 years, closer to 6 years, just because the funds were not there. My mom was working really hard to help me pay in addition to the scholarship I had and whatever minor part-time job I got on college. I used to update the volleyball team's website with the scores. And I remember every 2 weeks that I would keep the pictures updated on that website for the volleyball team for Webster University. And every 2 weeks I would get $116 as my paycheck. But education is something that was incredibly important to my parents because my parents are first generation everything. They're first
Wow.
generation grade school, middle school, high school, college. They're the first
Wow.
generation to earn a working class income. And so that made them really the people that everybody in our extended family depended on, both of my parents. And so they saw what education could do. And so they wanted me to have that. Also, I come, like you mentioned earlier, I'm from Nigeria. We were colonized by the British. And at the time of colonization, education, formal education, because there was education already in Nigeria, but British education was coming to Nigeria. And my grandfather chose to educate my dad, but not his twin sister. So my dad was formally educated to read and to write, but my dad's twin sister, even though she's educated, I guess, in a traditional way, she cannot formally read or write just because of that gap. So that's part of also my passion for empowering women because my dad's twin is incredibly smart. She just didn't have the same opportunities that he had because of the educational difference between them.
Wow. And and your degree is in computer science with a minor in business, which is
Yes.
for anybody, even if you don't want to be a financial person, that is a great field to get into. But even though you have that degree, you were inspired to start this journey of Clever Girl Finance. And it has
Yes.
just really taken off. You've been all over the world speaking, published 5 books. You've got the podcast, almost 1 million followers online. So just talk about where the inspiration came from to start this and why you feel it's so important. Because look, me and you are in total agreement. This is one of the most understood concepts that young people have, and you'll never hear me say otherwise that, for a long time, rural communities, even in the United States, we already know it wasn't Africa. Rural communities in the United States, especially rural black communities, were left behind on resources. They were
Mhm.
not given the proper access. They were not given the proper education. But a lot of that has changed. Just because your family didn't have access to something doesn't mean you can't do it now.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a quick story. So my dad, like I mentioned, my parents are first generation everything, and my dad came from a family where there was just a lot of poverty. My dad did not start the first grade until he was 13 years old. And he went on to get
Wow.
his because there was just no money. He was put on the farm
Wow.
to work on the farm. And he went on to get 2 masters, PhDs, and become incredibly successful in his life. So it doesn't matter where you're starting from, as long as you have intention and you have ambition and you have a vision for your life, you can succeed. And empowering yourself with knowledge while you are in school, while you're, focusing your studies, getting on top of understanding how finance works is really going to open doors for you. And so for me, I moved here from Europe to go to college. So I moved here as a first generation immigrant. And when I got here, I was exposed to things once I graduated from college, I was exposed to things like a 401k and credit cards. And these are all things that were foreign to my parents because they operated on a cash basis. Credit cards were not a thing at the time in Nigeria. And also the financial terms are different. So retirement savings is completely different in Nigeria than it is here, the same way it's different in Canada than it is here. So I had to learn all these things. And going through the process, I started teaching myself, how to invest, how to budget, how to save, how to build my credit. I made a ton of mistakes. And I got to a point where I had saved a good amount of money. And I was like, okay, the good thing for me to do is to go sit down with a financial planner and have a conversation about, I've saved a few $1,000s. I want to talk about this. I think I had like 40 or $50,000 saved at the time. And I went to his office and all he could ask me was like, where did you get this money? Do you have a rich boyfriend? He was so concerned that a man gave me this money. And I left so infuriated. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to prove everybody wrong because I think I was stereotype because I'm female, because I am black, because I'm an immigrant. And I was like, I'm gonna figure this out on my own. And so I went on coming out of college to save $100,000 in 3.5 years. So that was one of the things that
Wow.
helped really catapult Clever Girl Finance. But the reason why I started the business is because several years after graduating from college, I got to a point where I wanted to do something that mattered, something that had impact, something that was important. And I was working in corporate America, and my job was important, but I was just a number in a big corporation. And I was like, what is one thing that I do and I talk about very often that can be like a legacy that if my kids look back and say, what did mom do? It can be this. And I always talk to my friends about money, about saving, about spending, about mistakes I've made, about how I'm recovering, about paying off debt, about investing. And I was like, why don't you just talk about money and not just share your story, but also share the stories of others? And so that saving $100,000 was one of the stories I shared. And one thing I just want to highlight with that story is that it was many years ago because Clever Girl Finance has been around for well over 10 years at this point. And
Wow.
before that, several years had passed before I graduated, after I graduated from college. But what's interesting with that story was that I started in working in New York City. My salary was $54,000 before taxes. After taxes, that's about 40K in New York. Okay. It's
That's
not a
nothing
lot.
in New York.
So I started a side hustle. I was a girl, a photography side hustle. I was selling Avon to my mom's friends. I was a girl that would walk through the office building in New York City, and I made friends with all the executive assistants. And I was like, whenever there's a birthday party, they would call me because there would be food. And that would be my breakfast, my lunch, my dinner. Whenever there was a baby shower, a retirement party, they would call Bola because if I didn't have to spend money on groceries, that's money I could save. And I was working 7 days a week because I would go to work from 9 to 5. In the evenings, I would edit my photographs. On the weekends, I would go shoot weddings, baby sessions, family sessions, engagement sessions. And I was just hustling for that period of time to try to save as much as possible. I didn't believe I could save $100,000, but when I saved my first 10, I was like, wow, I saved 10,000. When I saved my next 20, I was like, wow. And so this was between my retirement savings, my emergency fund, and investments that I was making. So it was just really starting small. I started from zero and over time just being really aggressive because when you're young, you don't have any big obligations, you don't have a mortgage, you don't have a car note, you don't have any kids, you don't have like you're when you're a teenager or early 20s, you may think you have obligations, but by the time you get to your 30s, it's different. And so at that age, you have the opportunity to hustle as much as you can and save as much as you can. So that's what I did.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned a couple of things there that I think need to be talked about because look, I only have one young man in here with me today. Everybody else is females, and I think with what you're saying, it can really apply because from what I know, all of these want to go to college,
Hmm.
and we support all of them in that. I've got some incredibly intelligent women in here with me today, but you talk about saving the 401k, especially if it's employer contribution account. Even small things like that, because you could be making a lot of money and still not be wealthy.
Yes,
You can be having great paychecks, but if you're not saving for retirement, you're going to be working until you're 75. And
correct.
I just get infuriated. I see the social media stuff where they have the meme where they need to lower the retirement age. Well, the retirement has nothing to do with age. It has everything to do with money. So even small things like setting, if you are not putting in the maximum match of an employer contribution retirement account, you're absolutely out of your mind. And then, and even like a deferred compensation account. Yeah, I don't even miss that money, but that's extra money I have going into a deferred compensation account I can get when I retire. And I'm not even an expert, and I and I know these things. And then when you get to college, the credit card game, it just gets crazy. Every time you turn
Yes.
around, they're trying to hand you one. We'll get you a free T-shirt if you do this. And you can't even go to a basketball game. Up there you got the Knicks, but I can't even go to a Pelicans or Grizzlies game down here, and they're trying to give me a credit card for a free T-shirt. And
Yes.
then you go to the store, get 20% off today if you sign up for a credit card. It's just such an easy trap to fall into.
Yes. And now there's the trend of buy now, pay later. Every time you go, even to buy groceries, you have the option to buy now, pay later. There are different apps that do this. And it's again, it's all about empowering yourself with knowledge and having goals for yourself and also paying yourself first. Even if you don't have an employer right now, you can open up your own brokerage account, your own Roth IRA, traditional IRA, and start investing and start learning how to invest. Um, and so again, knowledge is power here, and just having intention, having goals, and getting clear on what you want to achieve in your life. And while you're young, this is the best time to do it. It is not about how much you make. I have a podcast called Clever Girls Know, and I interviewed someone a few years ago, and I asked her, she was an accountant, and I asked her, what is the craziest tax return you have ever filed? And I think she told me, I'm not exaggerating, but it was upwards of $50 million. And she said,
Dang,
despite filing that tax return, I think it was north of 50 million. I can't remember the exact amount, but it was like eight figures, north of 50 million. And after filing that tax return, that individual whose tax return she filed was still living paycheck to paycheck
that's unbelievable.
despite, and I was like, what could they have possibly done with the money? And I promise you, doesn't matter how much you make, there is a way to spend it. It was the private jet, the house in the blah blah blah, the vacation home in blah blah blah, the penthouse in blah blah blah. Your money will disappear as quickly as you make it. Doesn't matter how much you have. There's people out there who are willing to take your money and help you spend it. There are things that are going to be calling your name. So it's all about being intentional. What do you want for yourself? What do you want to achieve in your life? lay out your plan and start working it. And there will be a time where you can enjoy everything that you want, but build up to it first.
Yeah, and another thing I think is important because again, I have 15, 16, 17 year olds are here with me today, and they have dreams of owning a home, owning a business. Well, for that to happen, you're going to have to show some sort of bank statements. Having a Cash App card is not having a bank account. You know, obviously these peer-to-peer apps, they have their place. I'll use it when I need to, but my paycheck is not going into a Cash App account. It's going into a bank account, so I can have that relationship with the bank that I can build over time.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. You need to be able to show that when you're trying to start a business, there is a level of discipline that is required. Even when you're trying to save for your home down payment, even if you only have to put down a little bit of money, you have to build up a level of discipline where you can consistently put that money aside so that you can put it towards your down payment. So you can use it to set up your website, to create your product, create your service for your business. So, it's all about being intentional. And people say, well, I don't have enough money to save, right? If you have a part-time job, if you get a little pocket money from your parents, you get money here and there from aunties, uncles, birthdays, put money aside. I remember when
Yeah.
I was saving my $100,000, and $100,000 is for a teenager, that seems like a big amount of money, but I remember that I saved every single paycheck and I got paid every 2 weeks. And there was one paycheck where my bills were just so many, I only had $1 left over. And I had my money at a credit union, and the credit union wouldn't let me transfer $1. You had to have a minimum of $10 to make that online transfer. So I took my $1 and I drove to the bank, the credit union, and I'm like, I want to deposit this $1. And the teller looked at me like, did you really drive all this way from this address I see on your account to come deposit just $1? And I'm like, yes. I came to deposit $1 because I want to maintain my discipline and my consistency with saving, because that $1 is $1 that was not in my bank account yesterday. It adds up. And what happens
Wow.
when you're consistent and you maintain that discipline, right? Set reminders on your phone. You know how to like remind yourself to do something you really want. What happens when you're consistent is that you're saving when you have a little, but when you get the $100, the $1,500, $1,000, the $500, you are automatically disciplined to save some of it or all of it. You've built up the habit. There are people who make six figures, multi six figures, and they don't save anything because they never built up the habit and consistency of saving. And these are not people who are struggling with bills. These are people who have a lot of discretionary income. They have a lot of money to spend on shopping and travel and things, but they don't save anything because they have not built that consistency around saving.
Man, you said a lot right there. Well, I do have some questions from the students. I'll get to as many of these as I can. I like this one. This is Azaya Ray. She's in 11th grade. She's in the band here and wants to go to Mississippi State University and be a mental health counselor.
I
But
love
she
that.
asked, what problem did you see in the market that motivated you to start this business?
Yeah, so for me, it was the biggest problem was not talking about money as women. There is a lot of shame that is put on women around finances. Like a lot of times when you see successful women, people want to attribute her success to a man, or women feel like they are bad with money, because of historical things. I believe it wasn't up until 1970 where a woman could go into a bank and open up her own bank account without a man to be able to buy a house. And when you think about it generationally, if you go back maybe to our grandmother's generation or maybe your great grandmother's generations, and I'll give you like a subset of a group of people an example. So imagine a dad goes to work, he comes home, he talks to his sons about his business, what he did, about investing, da 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 da. But then the mother is the homemaker and she's home and she talks to her daughters about, the recipe. Everybody has a great recipe from their grandmother, their great grandmother as women,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And so
Oh
we
yeah.
want to we want to normalize having the conversation around money, especially for women. And that's what I wanted to do to empower women to do well with their money, because once we have the confidence, once we have the knowledge, we are actually better at money than men are. No shade, Greg. You are awesome. But we have a special touch when it comes to saving and investing, and the statistics support us. I was like, you know what? Let me talk about what I'm doing with my money to make it a normalized conversation. So I wanted to make, especially as a woman of color, I wanted to make talking about money normal, because women today Many women are single mothers, they're sole household earners, they're making more than their male counterparts. And you want to put yourself in a position where you have a seat at the table and you don't have to rely on anybody. You can stand on your own 2 feet. So that I wanted women to talk more about money without any shame and without any judgment.
That's awesome. And again, this isn't an opinion. This is a fact. Right now in the United States, black women are the most educated portion of society. And again, that's not an opinion. That is a statistic. And if they're going to be educated like they are, they need to have a seat at that table and they need to be just as knowledgeable as anybody else when it comes to money decisions. And I think that's funny you said that too, because my grandmother, who's still alive at 97 years old, when my grandfather
Wow.
passed, she didn't have a clue about how to do any of the money. And it wasn't that it was just the gender roles of the time. And
Yes.
I laugh about it now. But yeah, it is amazing that it was not that long ago where women really didn't even have an opportunity to be involved in that. So that is a very valid point. I like this one. This is Jasmine McBride. She's in 10th grade.
Hi,
Wants to
Jasmine.
go to Georgia State University. And wants to have her first job. And she asked, "What is an advice you would give to a teenager who wanted to start working?"
If you can get the job, you get the job. But when you get that job, put aside at least 10% of your money into a savings account that you don't touch. Challenge yourself to do that. And then if you are eligible to open up a IRA to invest for your future self, do that and start putting some of your 10% in there and just leave it alone. As a teenager, if you are 18 years old, by the time you're 28, you'll be blown away by how much you have put aside.
Yeah, and like I said, and you really don't even miss that money. So even if you put $50 a month in there, that compound interest is going to really build up, and you'd be
Yes.
shocked at how fast it can build up. And then a lot of these companies, even like Starbucks, they even have employer matched uh,
Yes.
employer matched retirement accounts. So
And
even
they
at a
even
place
some of
like
them will
that,
give you
just
support
because
to
you're
pay
not
for
working,
college and things like
yeah.
that. Yes. So when you're applying for jobs, look at companies and see, do they offer me any retirement savings options? Do they offer me any support to pay for college? Do they offer me any skill building opportunities, certifications, things like that? And then prioritize those type of jobs based on what you're interested in.
Big time. I like this one. This is Kalia Bullock. She's in 10th grade, and she asked, "What are some challenges you face as an immigrant woman, and how did you overcome them?"
Oh my goodness. So challenges, I mentioned going to that financial planner's office. Another thing was just not having my parents to talk to about money, not because they were not good with money, but because it was a completely different system. They couldn't tell me how to build credit. They couldn't tell me how the 401k worked. And obviously, I had to make friends, but many of my friends also were not informed about finances just generally because finance at the time that I was coming up was not taught in college, was not taught in high school, was not taught anywhere. You had to be inclined to want to pick up a finance book, which at the time, I remember walking into the bookstore to find a personal finance book for women, and the only book I found for women was a fantastic book, by the way, called Smart Women Finish Rich, that was written by Matt. And then Susie Orman wrote some books, but that was it. There was nothing else that existed. So just finding the resources I needed that I could relate to as a woman, also as a woman of color, also as an immigrant. And I had to learn by trial and error. So that was definitely a challenge for me.
All right, I got time for one more, and that's a great segue to this question. This is Zakiria Chambers. She's in 10th grade, and she asked, "Was finance always your first choice? And what steps did you take to get started in finance once you knew that's what you wanted to do?"
Finance was not my first choice. I'm a tech girl. I studied computer science in college. I have a minor in business. I was working in coding and testing and data structures and algorithms in my corporate career for 11 years before I started my business. But
Wow.
what led me to finance was just an interest in wanting to do, I've always wanted to do all my money. So coming out of college, remember I talked about my saving story, learning how to invest. And just over time, I always wanted to do well with my money because I know where I was coming from. My parents are first generation everything. They sacrificed so much to support me through college, helping me pay for college. So that was just something that I wanted to wanted them to be proud of me. So I spent a lot of time just learning about money, and I started my business because I had a passion for finance. It wasn't what I worked in, but I was passionate about money, spending it, earning it, investing it. So that's really where the finance angle came from. And then I went on to become certified as a financial educator as well. So I got the necessary certifications to be able to teach finance, but I didn't start there. So just because you start out one way doesn't mean you cannot change your career, you cannot change your mind, you cannot start a passion project. Um, Life gives you so many options. You just have to be intentional about what you choose.
Big time. I actually changed careers at 30 as well, so I'm in the same boat. Well, we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for joining us. But a couple things before we go. Obviously, clevergirlfinance.com. You've got free resources on there. You've got books. You've got the Clever Girl Knows podcast.
Yes.
All of your social media handles on there. You are an absolutely wonderful social media follow. Like we said before we started recording, you're on your YouTube. You've got some incredible videos. And then look, I tell young people all the time. We know social media has teenagers in a chokehold. That's it is what it is. I understand, there's silly people you want to follow on there. There's celebrities you want to follow. I'm a big sports fan. I like following a lot of athletes, and that's fine. But find people like you that can put something positive into your life. Find
Yeah.
somebody like you that's going to give you something you can actually use, not just something you can laugh at and share because it's funny. You know, and this is what I want to end on is that um, you know kids can say this is stupid, this is never going to apply to me, I don't need to know this, but not knowing even the basic things about personal finance can be a difference of thousands of dollars, tons of years, and tons of stress if it's not taken seriously and at least learning the basics right now.
Yeah. Having money is not stupid. Listen, when you have money, you know what it does for you? It gives you options, it opens doors, it lets you impact your community, change your family's lives. If that is stupid, I'd rather be stupid.
Well, again, we thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule. And everybody go to clevergirlfinance.com. All your resources on there, all your books are for sale, and your podcast everywhere you have your podcast. So we thank you so much. All the way from New York City, Bola Sokunbi, founder of Clever Girl Finance. Thank you so much for taking some time for us today.
Thanks for having me.
I talk to you soon, buddy.